a real nice space.
You are wearing, as part of your wonderful dress today, which, by the way, are very bright, you have a picture of Swami Muktananda, that looks like, from your hair.
That's right.
And
also his guru, Bhagwan Nityananda.
And let me ask you, the significance of wearing the beads, and you use the beads for prayer.
Correct.
Why don't we share it with the audience a little bit about it?
Sure. These are called Rudraksha beads, and basically they're used, I'm from the philosophy of Kashmir Shaivism, which has it to do with Shiva and Shakti. Shakti being the divine energy, and that the idea is that Shiva and Shakti is God and two, and which is in reality one.
Mm-hmm.
The male and female aspects of God, and so Shiva is the transcendental aspect of God, and Shakti is the manifest aspect of God. And the idea is that from Shakti, from the Divine Mother, all of the universe has emanated.
Another way to sort of say that is that we're in a soup of energy. And that some of it, we're going to sort of break this down into the area of physics, and that depending on how stuff is vibrating, it seems to be a little bit more solid than others, and so you go through this experience. And the practice that you're talking about is getting in a space where all of that melts away and it becomes one.
Correct.
Right? So we just sort of don't separate things out anymore from boy to girl to hard to soft, that it's just one wonderful blended soup.
That's a great way of saying it. Exactly. The unity of all things is really what we're talking about. The unity of all things. All things on a subtle level are one.
So before birth and before death, and just nice, peaceful, no distinction, no arguments, no comparisons, no judgments.
Correct. Non-dualistic. Non-dualistic.
Easier said than done, but maybe by saying that I'm creating my own barrier. It isn't that hard to do, really, because isn't that kind of our natural state?
That's correct. So that really is our true nature. So finding our true nature is the key. Finding that which exists already within us, vibrates, radiates from deep within our own being, is that unity.
So, you see somebody that's just bouncing off the wall, they're running around, they're having a heck of a day, the kids are crying, the car's rolling down the driveway, the news is talking about some horrible thing, and you just look at them and you say, chill out!
Take a chill pill.
And when you say, chill out! And what that does is it brings your attention to that high-pitched sound, and you break the chain of the illusion of all of this activity, and then 1 second you're awoke.
Exactly. And finding that spot within on a regular daily basis, I think, is helpful when there's all this turmoil that is perceived going around us. It's the perception of the turmoil, okay, and getting caught up in that turmoil.
So you could, just yell, chill out, or you could practice a mantra or some kind of a word, which is like a substitute for yelling out, chill out.
That's right.
And it just allows us sort of to take a breath, think that sound, that word, whatever it might be for you, and arrive at that equilibrium.
It's more of a gentle way of arriving at the same spot.
People don't know that you're doing it if you don't yell, chill out.
That's right. I can kind of sneak up on them and be nice and calm and peaceful.
This is important stuff. You've dedicated your life to it.
That's right. Yeah. And I've received so much, and I feel like I want to share what I found. So I'm kind of like looking to share this knowledge, if you will, to anyone who might be interested. And so I'm offering this knowledge.
We're going to talk about this little book, which is the newest, I guess one of the newest things that you've done.
Yes, that's right.
Before we get there, let's make fun of the fact that looking can sometimes help you, keep you from finding.
That's right.
they run into people that are looking so hard.
Yes.
That they can't seem to find it.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe just stopping and realizing, as St. Augustine said, that which you're looking for is that which is looking. So the one who's looking for all the answers is really the one who you already are.
Raman Maharishi Raman, he was the one that would always, no matter what question you asked, he would say, "Who's asking?"
Yes.
Yeah. Consider it.
Exactly.
That's just that was the question of the day. That's a good thing for us to ask. What we'll do is we'll go to break. When we come back, let's talk about who it is that might be looking.
Good.
Stay tuned as we continue with Stephen Bost. We're going to be talking about metaphysics, about his new little comparative treatise between East and West and oneness.
Exercise guide for folks over 50. Call 1-800-222-2225. To help prepare your community, you never know how many lives you might change. When we come together, we become part of something bigger than us all.
Welcome back to the Talking Stick.
We're here with Stephen Bost as we continue to explore the meaning of life. This notion that the person who is seeking, by definition, is separating themselves through the act of seeking.
Yes. Yes.
Therefore, being somewhat like a dog chasing their own tail a little bit. Who's seeking? What are we talking about here?
Maybe I could say it this way. In Eastern philosophy, they say God has 5 powers. The power of creation, the power of sustaining what's been created, the power of ultimately pulling back or destroying that which has been created, the power of concealing, and the power of grace. This concealing is the key here, what we're talking about. So God has concealed himself in his own creation. So all of us are God who's concealed himself within our own being. Or God's hiding within us, and waiting for him to discover himself. This is where grace comes in. Grace is a power of God that helps God to rediscover his own true nature.
You know, there's an Om that people do, and you have, an Om, and you have sort of the creation, the sustenance, and then the dissolution, the destruction. And if one just contemplates that, one will find what's concealed.
Yes, that's right. Sure.
And through the discovery of what's concealed, one becomes whole.
Correct.
Because that which was separate no longer is separate. And so all things are really in some, that we experience on this plane are either in the process of creation, maintenance, or destruction. And, our ability to perceive it is related to our sense of timeless, our own relationship to time. And so, for example, a mountain may appear immovable. That's a question in relation to how we interpret time,
And also, we're talking about the 5 powers of God, that we also have those same 5 powers, which you're kind of talking about. So we create things in our own life, we sustain them, and we destroy them, okay? And so we move from one job to another job to another job. We create that job, we sustain that job, and then we move on from that job. We also conceal things from ourselves. We kind of hide the truth from ourselves to some extent by our own actions. But at the same time, there's also grace in our lives. If we can just get in tune with that grace and give ourselves grace and give ourselves that benefit of the doubt that we really are a divine being, that we are a great being.
The role of grace in evolution on a more planetary basis, I don't know if you even care about planetary evolution.
Some.
But is it like a get out of jail card? You know, is it kind of like
yes
on the Monopoly board? You know, it allows you to
right. That's a good analogy. Because we can create for ourselves that opportunity to escape from the cycle of birth and death and all the suffering and pain and suffering. So by giving ourselves that grace, we then open ourselves to the divine grace.
The notion that creation or God would be such a compassionate and loving being that the father, mother would give you everything you ever wanted, everything, no matter how painful and how wretched and how horrible it makes you feel. It's your right to have it until you decide you don't want it anymore. And it's this whole notion of emanating and being born is something somebody
give people what they want in order they can want what I have to give.
And the whole time, the truth is in and all around us. In case in point being, if you just open your eyes, you'll see the diversity, the complexity, and the structure, and just the genius behind how experience is structured.
Yes. And it's there.
It's all around us.
It's all around us. It's just right there, right in front of us.
But because we're looking somewhere else in the past or in the future, we just can't appreciate the moment and see it sometimes.
It's all due to perception. And so what I'm talking about is altering our perception.
Speaking of that, people spend millions of dollars to do that, and that's why they have commercials, and we're going to have a commercial, see if it alters our perception and makes us buy something or think of something. And stay tuned as we continue. We'll be right back.
Good.
Sadhguru Nath Maharaj ki jai, Parvati Pataye Har.
In the course of American history, conflict led to victory and defeat. The government signed many treaties with the Native Americans and broke all of them. Now there is a new treaty, and it gives the Indians a new opportunity to invest in their future by using revenue from tribal gaming operations on the reservation. Now some say the law should be changed, but we say don't break another treaty. Her future depends on it. Tribal government gaming. Hope for the future.
Welcome back to the Talking Stick.
Did it change your mind? Did it affect you? The way we spend, people in some back room or in Madison Avenue spend their time to affect our thinking. Why don't you give me something for them? I'm trying. I don't even know what to ask you, frankly.
Sure. Okay. I think one of the problems of the world is that people are looking in the wrong direction for the answers that they're looking for. Okay, so what I'm trying to say, let me give you an example. When people, let's say someone has an experience of God, do they have that experience outside of their own soul or within their own soul? So this experience that people have is not from out there, it's in here. And this is the key, looking within. So if you can, individuals, if they can take the time and quit looking out here for answers and start looking in here, all the answers, everything that they possibly could want is there within their own heart.
You take, for example, we had a stunning sunset last night. Just phenomenal.
Yes.
The valley was just, one of the...
I saw it.
I think it was one of the top 4 or 5 in my lifetime. I thought it was just interesting, it was just phenomenal. What a wonderful thing. And I look out and I say, okay, there is, such beauty. How could anybody even imagine that there's anything but God,
Sure.
And then conversely, you go watch CNN or Fox News and get a window into the carnage and death and devastation and ugliness and greed and I could go on and on.
Yeah, right.
And that isn't God.
Dualistic.
For some.
Yes.
Let's take this outside sunset and this experience, and then this experience that I just explained through this. Say we were there in the war. How does that relate to inside, outside, and how do you say that's an inner experience when it appears to be so outer?
Sure. One of the keys in the Upanishads say that God is both inside and outside. And this is where it gets a little tricky.
Upanishads are ancient scriptures in the Indian or Hindu tradition.
That's right.
Okay.
And my favorite of books. I love these Upanishads. And what they say is that God is both outside of us and inside of us. It's so finding that is the key. Now, what were you talking about, all the different stuff going on? That's dualism. That's where one group is seeing the other group as separate from themselves. Say the Muslims over there who want to kill us. They see us as separate from themselves. And we see them separate from us. In reality, we are, on the inner level, that same divine being. It's because of our lack of understanding.
So, with all of this devastation, how can we say that there's a good God?
Well, maybe,
or a bad God?
Yeah, well, maybe we're not saying it correctly. Maybe what we understand is that God is within all living beings and is the source of their soul. And that really, that what goes on outside of that is the play of the divine. And so it's getting in touch with that inner divine being who is all of us, who is us, that we begin to alter our perception of what's going on, and we begin to see that this is all a part of God's play. It's God who has, remember I said, concealed himself within all living beings. He has concealed himself, and therefore all the beings who are in this play are the divine being in his own play. And death doesn't really exist.
One would argue, and that's quite a statement you're saying there, death doesn't exist. If you were to break down the general phobia that people have, is, I have read a lot of people that have suggested that the basic fear of death is the underlying motivating factor for much of what we do. And until we can get to a point where we can reconcile the notion of death and what it means, and whether it's this eternal life or this letting go and being able to accept the notion of death, one is truly never free.
Yes. I ask people sometimes, do you ever remember a time when you didn't own experience is, haven't you always existed? Sure, you could say, well, maybe I was a time, but in reality, I look at myself.
I remember that night. I was real drunk. Yeah, no.
Been there, done that. But haven't we always existed? And I say, yes, we've always existed and will always exist. That we will never cease to exist.
You know, we talk about energy and things transforming and moving from one makeup into another makeup, from one constitution to another constitution.
Mm-hmm.
And when we come back from this break, we're going to talk about what that means and the ramifications of constitution and attachment to constitution and the role it plays in the definition of death.
Good.
And if anybody out there is following this, they're going to get a brownie point because it's important stuff, but stay tuned.
नीलकण्ठाय मृत्युञ्जयाय सर्वेश्वराय सदाशिवाय श्रीमन्महादेवाय नमः.
Hi, I'm Al Unser. I survived 30 years of auto racing, but I almost died just having fun on my boat. I was in the water trying to untangle an anchor line from a prop. I didn't know that generators produce deadly levels of carbon monoxide. I was lucky. They pulled me from the water before I drowned. Prevent carbon monoxide poisoning on your boat. When it comes to carbon monoxide poisoning, what you can't see can harm you.
Your resume looks good, but I want to see how you think. Okay, here you've got your affluent gay couple, your disenfranchised African American, and your low-income white male. Which one is the most desirable market to sell our new cigarettes to?
How about these guys?
Those are my kids. You'd market to my kids?
I'm just saying.
That's the kind of out-of-the-box thinking they have to see here.
Welcome back to the Talking Stick.
Pretty scary commercial, wasn't it? Now, I was throwing out this notion that fear of death is directly tied into the identity and or our definition of self. And that perhaps there's another definition or experience of self that we can have that can liberate us from the fear of death.
Yes. So we're talking about the inner self now.
Well, most people experience this, outer self, if you will, and they can't identify with an inner self. And so they're very attached to this outer self.
Yes.
And it's the fear of the loss of the outer self that people identify with death.
That's right, exactly. And so it's that physical self that we consider our outer self, and that there actually is this other power, that there's the power of our minds, the power of our soul, that is what needs to be gotten in touch with, so we can then transcend that feeling of the outer self. So what you do in meditation and contemplation, you kind of lose your attachment to this outer self. You go inside and you start to experience this great, beautiful experience of your own inner being, this own inner divinity.
For someone out there, we'll call them a traditional Christian, whatever that means.
Sure.
They clearly understand the notion that there's an eternal soul. They also believe some other things, but nevertheless, this notion that this outer person, the body falls and then something survives. Some people have traditions of resurrection and such. And that's not a strange notion at all for someone like that. The whole purpose of this meditation and transcendence is to experience our inner self without this outer accrement, so that we can become this identified with our eternal self while we're alive, and therefore lose attachment to this outer self and understand that we're eternal.
Right. And what's interesting is that where does this eternal soul come from? Does this our eternal soul come from God? If we believe it comes from God, then is it separate from God or is it one with God?
Well, some would argue that we share a soul.
That's right. Or is it God? It's taken on the cloak of individuality. The Upanishads say that individuality does not exist. That's a heavy one.
The purpose of which is to reflect and see itself and go through the co-creative process of growth. Heady stuff. So people can learn about this by contacting you, talking to you.
Yes.
And you've got this great little book that you've put together. You've got some other materials you've written in the past. Eastern and Western religion and the role of mysticism, which is the commonality between sort of all paths.
Yes, right. That's right.
Mystic union. And here you've done sort of a little, the West says this, East says that, and it gives people a good sense. Now we've got a website up there. You hold classes.
Yes.
And you want to tell people about this.
Yes. So through Mental Physics, and I don't have their website just offhand, but they can also get in touch with me at 760-902-4330.
You can also call us at the Talking Stick, and we'll be happy to refer you to this delightful man on a delightful mission with a very kind heart and a very peaceful nature.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching us. I love this stuff. I hope you do too, because we keep bringing you lots of it. Let's all grow a little bit, if not a lot, but always remember to grow a little bit every day. Thanks for watching.
आयुश्च मे जरा च म आत्मा च मे तनूश्च मे शर्म च मे वरम च मे इंगानि च मे स्थानि च मे परूगोषि च मे शरीराणि च मे